Welcome to Magic Arcanum! I'm Ryan Gomez. Behind the scenes is Nicole Burdick, and we're so glad you're here because it's story time! During my recap for the Neon Dynasty story, I challenged you guys to help me reach a record number of likes on that video, and you delivered, smashing the goal in just 4 days. And since I'm a man of my word, today we're getting to know the newest planeswalker in Magic by taking a look at the origin story for Kaito Shizuki. First, let me say, the timeline on this one is a bit confusing because the main story starts 10 years ago, and then the Emperor goes missing, and then it jumps ahead 10 years to the present day. But Kaito's origin story takes place during that 10-year gap. In fact, his tale begins 1 year after the mysterious disappearance of the Emperor, and Kaito is already working for a Reckoner gang run by Satoru Umezawa. He joined them after leaving the Imperial Palace because their extensive criminal network was the best potential source of information regarding the man with the metal arm, the one Kaito saw in the Emperor's chamber that fateful night. One interesting bit here is that Kaito tries to complete his assignments with efficiency, but the other gang members give him a hard time about that because he doesn't always send the right message, if you know what I mean. And now, the big boss man wants young Kaito to prove his commitment by completing a dangerous bounty. He's supposed to locate a futurist prodigy and steal his research. This target ends up being Tameshi, a moonfolk who is prototyping a way to connect Kami with technology. Now again, Tameshi appears in the main story, but after the 10-year jump, so this will be the first time these characters meet narratively. Kaito learns that Tameshi is operating out of the Boseiju district in a forest filled with Kami who don't really tolerate outsiders. Realizing it will be difficult to navigate this territory without a guide, he calls up his sister Aiko, who has spent the last year studying to become a Kami diplomat. She agrees to help because Tameshi's research is illegal and she's worried about him harming the spirits, but she insists that Kaito obey the rules and customs of the forest, lest he set human-Kami relations back 1,200 years. You know, no pressure or anything. So they enter the forest and come across Kadama of the West Tree, who gives them permission to continue on through so long as they don't cross the river. If I asked you to guess what happens next, you'd guess that Kaito crosses the river, right? Yeah, he does, and his sister does not follow, so our young ninja continues to explore on his own, and he finds Tameshi's makeshift lab tucked up against the side of a fallen tree. Tameshi defends himself from Kaito's sudden intrusion, but Kaito eventually pins the moonfolk down and starts trying to choke him before Aiko appears and tells her brother to knock it off. Turns out she just wanted to leave an offering for the Kami before crossing the river because she's still desperately hoping to keep this a diplomatic mission. Meanwhile, Tameshi recognizes Kaito's drone. It's a flying crane given to him in the main story by Katsumasa when he was visiting the Imperial Palace shortly before the Emperor vanished. Tameshi explains Katsumasa was his mentor, and he's now following his footsteps to connect Kami with technology, but swears he's trying to do it in a helpful way. Aiko says, yeah, right, and opens one of the nearby metal cages, expecting it to hold captive spirits, but instead another drone walks out, this one looking like a tanuki. Tameshi goes on to explain he's worried about the forthcoming merge between the spirit realm and the physical one, and he believes that by preserving Kami within technology, he'll be able to better study them and prepare for whatever is waiting for them all on the other side of the merge. Specifically, he built this prototype to hold one special Kami, the one that embodies the Emperor's connection to Kyūdai and the spirit realm. As it happens, Aiko saw this kami the night the Emperor vanished, the night we know her spark ignited, and she's been searching for it the same way Kaito has been searching for the man with the metal arm for the past year. Suddenly, Kaito hears the wail of Kyodai and rushes off deeper into the forest because he thinks that sound means the Emperor must have returned. Instead, he follows the sound to the base of a giant tree, and waiting for him is a translucent tanuki-shaped kami with glowing eyes. Tameshi and Aiko catch up, and they begin to debate the morals of using the kami as tools to study the merge gates, but before they can agree what to do with this technology, they are ambushed by reckoners. Turns out they never really trusted Kaito, and they had followed him, knowing he'd lead them to Tameshi so they could take his inventions for themselves. This leads to another round of fighting, where we find Aiko literally had weapons up her sleeve, even though she's been pushing the diplomatic angle this whole time. To be fair, she tells Kaito that's how diplomacy works. You start with peaceful words, but when those fail, you have to be ready to back them up with blades. The Reckoners outnumber our heroes, and things start to look bleak when suddenly hope arrives in the Order of Jukai. A group of monks come out of the forest and begin attacking the Reckoners, allowing Kaito, Tameshi, Aiko, and the kami to escape. As they flee, they cross paths with Gravelighter, the kami of forgotten clearings. The spirit is angry at the sudden disturbance caused by the group running through, and so she attacks. The Tanuki kami cries out, which is apparently a command given to Gravelighter because she abandons her attack, and Kaito starts to realize just how special this spirit of the spark really is. The group safely reaches the edge of the forest, where Tameshi admits he's the one who called for the monks back when his security cameras first picked up Kaito and Aiko coming towards his camp. So while everyone is relieved to have gotten away from the danger, there are still some things they need to resolve. Aiko doesn't want Tameshi to continue his research. It's illegal, for one, but also possibly dangerous. Using tech to protect the kami is one thing, but since it could also be used to control them, it could therefore be used to weaponize them, and that's not a path the Imperials want to be on. Tameshi agrees that he will abandon his research because he was only trying to help the kami, and his experiment needed a willing participant, which he has so far been unable to find. To be clear, during the fight with the Reckoners, Tameshi had tried to get the Tanuki kami into the Tanuki drone body, but it wouldn't do it. So he gifts the drone to Kaito, figuring he could replace the old crane he had been using. Tameshi then heads back into the forest to salvage whatever remains of his camp, and Kaito tries to give the kami over to Aiko so she can take it back to the Imperial Palace, where it can live safely with Kyodai. Aiko asks her brother what he plans to do next, since he can't go back to the Reckoners, and he says he'll figure something out, but his goal remains unchanged. He still wants to find out what happened to the Emperor and bring her home, like she's Matt Damon in a summer blockbuster. The kami gets really excited during all of this and finally climbs into the matching drone, and then telepathically tells Kaito that her name is Himoto. Aiko is a little worried because her brother is now holding exactly the type of creation she didn't want Tameshi to finish making, but before they can talk about it, Kaito feels a pulling sensation deep within him. It's his spark ignited by his connection to Himoto, and so he experiences his first planeswalk. The story then wraps up with an epilogue set a year later. Kaito is back on the streets of Kamigawa, confident in his planeswalking powers and his other skills, determined as ever to track down the missing Emperor with help from his faithful companion, Pom-Pom-chan. But first, he's got to meet up with his sister and go check in on his old friend, Tameshi. And that's it. That's what happens in Kaito's origin story. Feels like calling this one the origin story is generous. We learn more about Kaito's history in the main story. This one covers his spark igniting, true, but leaves us with a lot more questions than answers. According to this story, Kaito was 15 years old when he took jobs for the Reckoners, which makes him just 14 when the Emperor vanished and he left his imperial studies to go find her. And we know the Neon Dynasty story was 10 years after that, making him 24 there. There is an interesting wave of young planeswalkers right now. We've got Kaito, the Emperor, Teo, Tyvar, Will and Rowan, Nico, Samit, Basri, and Huatli all seem to be under 25. It's almost like they're giving us this big roster of new characters to follow as older ones fall to the Phyrexians. Anyway, Kaito is considered our ninja planeswalker, but I did not see him exhibit a lot of the classic ninja traits. They do establish that he's a good pickpocket, but he is often reckless and impulsive, and though his motivations are good in that he wants to find his missing friend, the Emperor, his choices often put other people at risk. In these types of videos, I love to examine characters by asking two simple questions. Number one, what does this character want? Number two, what are they willing to do to get it? Well, Kaito wants to find the Emperor. That's his only stated goal in both his origin story and the main thread for Neon Dynasty. As for what he's willing to do, he spends a year doing odd jobs for a criminal gang, hoping that they have some information about the man with the metal arm that he saw in Kyodai's chamber that fateful night. He tries to complete these tasks without confrontation when possible. But then he's willing to break promises made to his sister and to Kodama of the West Tree just by crossing a river. So he sometimes acts like the rules don't apply to him. And after his spark ignites, he's willing to spend another 8 or 9 years searching plane after plane without much to show for it. I should point out the established timeline, as I understand it, means Kaito was a planeswalker during the events of War of the Spark, but I can't find anything that would explain his absence there. Let me also say, in the main Neon Dynasty story, Kaito has telekinetic powers that supplement his speed and agility. He also carries a sword that can sort of reshape itself, and various drones, smoke bombs, other weapons, and ninja gear. All of this justifies the blue part of his color identity. Blue is the color most closely associated with artifacts and technology, and that is something Kaito is passionate about. Remember, he's an orphan because his parents died in a lab accident after they were denied advanced black market medical technology. So, from age 5, Kaito has seen technology as a solution to a lot of problems and isn't shy about using whatever he needs to help him with his own task. The black part of his color identity comes from his ambition. He is ceaseless in his quest to find the Emperor, but note that it is for selfish means. He wants his friend back. At no point does he really seem to consider Kamigawa needs its leader. He's not doing it for society's benefit, only his own. And we see that a bit better in the main story too, where he has some tension with Lightpaws, who fears Kaito will corrupt the mind of the Emperor with his ideas about making technology more accessible to the people of the plane. Ultimately, Kaito might end up being the savior of Kamigawa, or maybe beyond. If he's able to find Tamio and recover the reality chip, he might be the one to turn the tide in the battle against the Phyrexians. And if he ever does catch up to the Wandering Emperor, hopefully this time he'll remember to use Himoto to try and stabilize her spark. But what do you think? Will it be long before we see this ninja planeswalker again? Where might he show up next? Let me know down in the comments, and then make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the great stories you'll only find here on Magic Arcanum. We'll see ya!